about DIY Lowell?
Yeah. So
Oh, no problem at all.
Yeah. Next time, you don't have my cell phone number?
I probably
Oh, okay. You want it? Next time, just text me or call me instead. I would have loved to make it. I got it this weekend. I was looking for. I didn't make it. I didn't try to attend the meeting last Tuesday, because my son got serious. I normally check my email on the weekend to prepare for my meeting. I didn't try to come last Tuesday, so check
It's no problem at all. It's once a month, so.
How much email you get?
Okay.
Guys, I will send you back with my cell phone number for next time.
Perfect. I'll do that.
I think I'm available.
Okay. Yeah, we got a good probably 35 people, so it was a good turnout.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, I'd like to call the meeting, Housing Subcommittee meeting to order, please. Today, Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. It's at 5:36 p.m. I'd like to welcome my colleagues. Councillor Chow is on my left. He's a member of the Housing Subcommittee, and we have also Councillor Eric Kitchier. He will be joining us shortly. Tonight, we will talk about the housing production plan, and I would like to turn to Franz from the DPD.
Council, if I could just do a quick roll call.
Oh, okay, yes.
Council Yim.
Here.
Council Chow.
Here.
Council Gitchia.
Here.
3 present.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Clerk. Sorry about that. So I'd like to turn over to Franz from the DPD. If you could introduce everyone, and then you can start the presentation, please.
Great, thank you, Councillor. For the record, Franz Sigliano, Senior Planner with the Department of Planning and Development, and I have with me the Deputy Director of Planning and Development, Camilo Espatia, and Chris Hayes from NIMCOG. So over the past 2 years, we've been working on the housing production plan. Work on this plan wrapped up in August of 2024. DPD worked very hard with NIMCOG on this plan, doing a lot of community outreach and doing a lot of data analysis and to identify the housing challenges in Lowell and potential recommendations to address some of the housing concerns that we see here in the city. So we do have Chris here who is prepared to make a brief presentation for the councilors.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Chris, to the Housing Subcommittee.
I see the presentation here on this screen. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Fran, and thank you, Subcommittee, for having us here to talk about the Lowell Homes and Housing Plan. I'm Chris Hayes, Housing and Economic Development Program Manager for Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. It's one of 13 regional planning agencies. Ours serves the city of Lowell and surrounding communities, and we think of ourselves as a really cheap consultant, or maybe sometimes a free consultant, because we're really trying to work at your direction to achieve your vision. And we're really excited to talk about that vision today. I'll talk about what the Homes and Housing Plan is and some of the key findings and indicators of progress on that plan. But more importantly, we'll talk about the goals and some of the key strategies and what the next steps are. And so a housing production plan is really an opportunity to build consensus and gather input from residents. But it's not just a plan for the city, it is a plan for all the stakeholders in the housing ecosystem. So developers and financiers and builders and residents. And we want to align all those efforts so that we are all rowing in the same direction. But it also does provide preferred status for certain state grants as well. In order to provide that status, it needs to have certain elements. And that is why you'll see those three major sections in an introduction. And those specifically have specific data points and specific descriptions based on housing production guidelines produced by the state. But also unique to Lowell, we worked hand in hand with the Lowell Forward planning process. And we really see these as a mother and daughter document. And that all of the input gathered for Lowell Forward and the Homes and Housing Plan come together for both plans, and they both work in concert. Talking about that public engagement, I want to say, first off, we definitely heard a lot of pride in neighborhoods, from the Acre to Belvedere to north of the river. But that housing affordability was, I think, the second highest concern in the Lowell Forward visioning. So it was incredibly important to the residents to address housing challenges and housing affordability. More than half of the renter respondents in the survey reported a challenge of rent being too costly in particular. But on the good side, a majority of the respondents also supported a lot of key production strategies, some of which we'll be talking about today. The last thing I want to highlight is we heard over and over again that communication and inclusive engagement were top priorities for all of the actions. And we heard that in about 68 key informant interviews or focus groups. We had more than 60 attendees at a citywide meeting as part of the Lowell Forward process that was specifically about homes, housing, and community. And a survey about homes and housing received more than 850 responses. And we were also guided by a 13-member community advisory committee of Lowell residents, including a rep from the planning board and a rep from the ZBA. This slide right here shows kind of a chaotic scene, but those were stickers that were stuck on a map that we had at the visioning session. And this is just an example of the type of input we received. When we analyzed it, we saw that there was a clear desire for mixed use, which includes commercial uses and housing coinciding in neighborhood centers and in downtown. And we saw a real support for multifamily adjacent to those centers. This is what really made us consider a neighborhood center approached plan. So we'll talk briefly about the key findings and vision and indicators of progress. I won't go through these one by one. There's 10 key findings that are in the executive summary. I really wanted to highlight one of them, though, which is that we found through the data and through all of those public outreach that Lowell really is a city of opportunity. Young families, young households often move into Lowell and settle in Lowell and grow their careers and incomes in Lowell. And we see that Lowell's actually very good at this, at fulfilling the promise of being a gateway city. And so part of what was in our minds as we developed this plan with DPD is how can we continue to maintain that status. And we have kind of a vision statement that we've developed collaboratively from all of that input. And I just wanted to highlight a few pieces of it. One of which is supporting people's needs, goals, and dreams, not just shelter. That's why we changed the name from Housing Production Plan to Homes and Housing Plan, because each of these shelters really is a home for people's dreams. Other excerpts, continuing opportunity for households of all types, regardless of their stage of life or economic situation. So young people to elders, and welcoming to newcomers and long-term residents alike. A thriving community economy and a model for other gateway cities. So trying to be visionary in the way that we produce housing for the city. And then finally, of course, proactively and affirmatively promoting fair housing, continuing this excellent work on constantly fighting discrimination and eliminating segregation. And so we've got 7 housing goals to advance to that vision. Again, I won't go through these all because I am going to be going through them one by one with some key actions on each one. But what's really important are the indicators of progress. That is the goals set forth in the plan, numerical goals. And these align with Lowell Forward goals. That includes 3,150 new units by 2030, 800 of which would be income restricted affordable. 599 or fewer households lacking full kitchens or plumbing. That often means missing a stove or maybe missing a bathtub. And that's self-reported by the American Community Survey in the US Census. We also are recommending a goal of 36.6% of cost burden households or less. Cost burden means a household is paying 30% or more of its income on housing and 19% or less on severely cost burden households. Those seem like high numbers, but that actually represents a doubling of progress that the city has made over the last 10 years in the next 5 years. Then finally, a 6% blended vacancy rate. That means working toward 8% vacancy rate, which is considered healthy for rental units, and a 2%, which is considered healthy for ownership units. But really the most important parts are the goals and the strategies. And so I'm just going to highlight one strategy for each goal, but of course there's I think 44 strategies altogether that you can see in the plan. The key strategy we saw for equitable and accessible growth is to undertake neighborhood level planning to identify multifamily priority sites. So that's really looking at each neighborhood and not painting with a broad brush, but rather doing some intense community to see which sites in each neighborhood could support those healthy neighborhood centers. A key strategy for homes for all types of household is to look at the zoning and make sure there are adequate opportunities for developing special types of housing. So that could be micro units, which are some of the most popular types of units for young families or for young individuals now, or for empty nesters. And also single room occupancy, which is a great affordable option for people who make extremely low incomes. For housing quality, we're recommending creating a well-funded program for no-interest home improvement loans. The city does have a good history in providing home improvement loans, and we have some specific suggestions working with the city's community development department on how to enhance that. We have two key strategies for eliminating homelessness because that's such an important goal. And one of them is to develop a housing first incentive zone, which would be identifying places where supportive housing with wraparound services or housing targeted towards people with extremely low incomes and incentivizing housing in the places that are identified. And then we're also recommending to creating a new staff position dedicated to housing stability. This is a model used in several other gateway cities to work not necessarily with organizations that are working with people who are already homeless and in sheltered situations, but actually people living in marginal housing situations that could slip into homelessness and trying to prevent that as much as possible. A key strategy for housing options for low and very low incomes is one that I understand the city has already started the wheels turning on, which is developing an affordable housing trust fund, which is a great way to flexibly fund many of these other strategies. A key strategy for affordable ownership, home ownership, is expanding the first-time home buyer program. We understand that Merrimack Valley Housing Partnership has been working on providing a program that was popular in Boston and expanding it here to Lowell, and we recommend supporting that. And a key strategy for fair housing is a fair housing plan, and that really is a kind of an audit of existing zoning and policies to make sure that they aren't creating any unintended consequences that create barriers for different types of folks to live in the neighborhood of their choice. So those are some of the key actions. Obviously, there's a lot more, and we're happy to talk about any of them that you have questions on. But the next steps, it must be adopted by both the planning board, the housing production plan must be adopted by both the planning board and the city council, and then submitted to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, which has 90 days to make sure that it meets all of those requirements that I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation. But perhaps more importantly, implementation. The housing plan doesn't change zoning. It doesn't create any policies. It doesn't do anything but communicate. And so the city manager's office, city staff, the planning board, and the city council are all important partners in implementing that plan. And the action plan outlines, that is in the full plan, outlines a city steward and partners for each of the, I said 46 strategies. But we realize that those strategies are going to be further refined through public processes, that some might require public input, some might require funding support, some might require planning board or city council votes. So this is a roadmap, but it's not the final destination. And that said, NIMCOG and a lot of other regional and state partners always welcome requests for assistance, either being direct technical assistance or maybe assistance with grant writing or identifying other funding sources or any other types of support. And we're always happy to hear those requests. And that's really it. So at this point, I think that we are ready to take questions or comments and would like to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Chris. There's a lot to chew on. However, we were grateful to friends send us the Lowell forward, both the full page, the full report of 143 pages long, and the executive summary. So we had a chance to kind of look over, and we have a few comments. So I'm opening up to a question by my colleagues if they have any other question for Chris or for DPD as a whole. Yes, Councillor Chow.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, also echo the Chairman's gratitude. Thank you to all three of you for putting a wonderful presentation in front of the whole board today. It's a lot of work. I'm very happy to hear about the over 3,000 units that's going to be built by 2030. One other thing I learned about from the report was Lowell is the city opportunity, which is great to know about. A lot of people come to Lowell, and their income increase while living in Lowell. That's a great thing. It tells you the type of opportunities and the robustness that the city provide. But at the same time, I guess towards the end of the spectrum, I'm concerned about we're able to bring people in for opportunities and so forth with the development that we're trying to do. What kind of development, what would look like, and you might not have to answer this tonight, but what kind of development would look like that after people are sort of making it, so to speak, right, when their income increases and so forth, the numbers in here shows that they move out of the city. How do we keep the residents in Lowell? We know that they come to Lowell, they fall in love with Lowell, they raise their family in Lowell, and most likely the kids go through the Lowell school system because by the when they get to be elderly, then they get to move out, or when they become to make it, that they move out. What kind of development plan would keep the residents that come to Lowell and keep them in Lowell?
I'm happy to answer a couple of the strategies in the plan, but I also think DPD will have some great answers for that too. The strategies that come to mind about retaining folks, one of which is this neighborhood hub strategy, where really making sure that the neighborhoods in Lowell feel safe, that people build upon that pride in their neighborhoods and feel connection with their neighborhoods and want to stay in their neighborhoods. Second is not so much a strategy, but kind of a more general guiding recommendation, which was to think about the opportunities for home ownership in some of the central neighborhoods, while also thinking about rentals throughout the city. The Acre Crossing project is a great example. Are there other home ownership opportunities in central Lowell that could be developed alongside expanding rental opportunities as well? The home buyers program, I think, is very integral to that. A lot of folks do move to New Hampshire because that's what they can afford for the space they want. If there's some support to be able to afford the space you need in Lowell, that I think would help retain the households and families that are growing in Lowell. There's probably other strategies in there, but those are the ones that pop in mind.
Yeah, I would like to add, thank you, members of the council. I would like to add that maybe another strategy is having diversity in housing that allows them to stay in Lowell while their needs are changing, and so while their families are adjusting to either, whether they grow in the family or the family actually becomes smaller, because this also applies for seniors that we would like to remain in the city. That having that housing diversity, it's another strategy that allows people to stay as their needs change, their income changes, so that they can always stay in Lowell regardless of the income, the housing, the household size, and they would still have the opportunity to either for home affordability, for home ownership or rentals, that we provide them with those opportunities, and that flexibility comes with the type of housing that we have in the city.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
could have a follow-up
Sure.
question,
Sure,
somewhat
Councilor.
related. Again, like I'm excited to hear about how many units are going to be built in the city of Lowell, and that's really focus of the administration and city council. I think the basis of this plan of this Lowell Forward is to have development throughout the entire city, and the plans that I see is like a lot of the multi-unit families, and it's also the subsidized housing units. It's sort of concentrated in certain areas of the city only, and I think one of the goal in the plan is to have it more distributed evenly throughout the entire city, which I think is good. To balance out the city, to how everybody have that, again, use the opportunity of housing throughout the entire city. Maybe this is more of a question for Camille or Ms. Sigliano. Do you see much development plans come to the city that would show that development in different area of the city, or is it all the plans coming up for development going to the same area of the city all the time?
I can jump in. I would say that in general, there are patterns that show that development is concentrated in certain areas more than others. And I believe that there is an exhibit somewhere in the plan, I could be wrong, that shows, are you familiar with what page it might be on? No, okay. That marks where development is taking place with dots. So you can kind of see it's a cluster map showing where development is taking place. In general, there is more development and more units being produced toward the center of the city, as well as along the Lowell connector, interestingly. And there has been less development elsewhere in the city.
I would argue that's driven by what the zoning dictates and how, I don't want to say permissive, but what the process of development looks like from the zoning perspective. And so one of the things we want to do is, understanding that change is inevitable, how do we manage that change? And so part of what we're starting this year, Fran will be actually leading that project, is a citywide zoning study. In there is where we'll determine where is it that we can discuss density, what does density mean, what does density mean in size, in setbacks, in amount of units, where can it happen so that we can actually manage the growth, so that maybe it becomes an opportunity to redistribute where the patterns that we are seeing today in terms of housing production may or may not change.
Is there some kind of a density index? Again, I'm not a planner, so I don't know much of the terminologies being used out there, some of the strategy out there, but is there some kind of a density index that planners use to identify that at some point certain neighborhood will be overdeveloped? Because
No, I don't believe we have an index. We do, through zoning, control the amount of density that could happen in a plot of land or in a certain parcel. But there's no number that dictates how much is a lot within a neighborhood, how much is very little. I guess that's something that we can study through the exercise that we will have with the consultant. That process will be a lengthy process for good reasons. It's a very thorough analysis with a lot of community engagement, and any zoning changes or rewrites, which I don't suppose are going to be gigantic or an overhaul of our old book for zoning bylaws, but whatever changes we do have in specific parts of the city will have to go through the council anyways. So those will be vetted both by the community, the planning board, and maybe even go through obviously the housing subcommittee and ultimately the council for them to approve. That's what will determine what does density mean for different neighborhoods, because it's also the perspective or the perception of what density means for different neighborhoods, depending on what the existing housing stock looks like.
Yeah, thank you.
Chris, go ahead, follow up.
I just wanted to add one thing that is in the plan about density. It doesn't necessarily address density as units per acre, but it does touch upon number of people per room. And so what the plan is concentrated on is the quality of life impacts for when families are doubled up in a unit, when there's more than, I believe it's one person per room in a household. So a lot of what this plan looks at is the living conditions inside of the unit and how to make sure that we are providing for good living conditions inside the units.
Thank you. Before I recognize Councillor Kitchir, I'd like to recognize Councillor Mercier, who's in the chamber, Councillor Belanger, Councillor Nguyen, and we have Rep. Tara Hongs also joining us as well. Welcome to the Housing Subcommittee. Councillor Kitchir.
Thank you, and thank you for the well-written report, but I think there's a lot of worlds colliding at once when you start talking about this. Reality is that somebody has to pay for all of this affordability also on the backside. So are we running those people out of the city, and then who actually has the path to pay for this? Is it affordable home ownership, or is it affordable housing that just comes into play and says, okay, we're going to subsidize for how long? And as we've seen over the last 2 years that I've been sitting here, homeless is not a simple, okay, let's put them in a place. We've offered people down by the river plenty of places, but it's not as simple as, okay, we're going to take people who are unhoused and put them in housing and we're all going to live happily ever after. It's not working that way. And the plan it's really dated compared to some of the research that's being done in the city right now. And when you look at some of the things that have just gone on, you go to Gorham Street where Heinz's Tavern was, we made a big mistake on the MBTA when we changed the parking requirements within it. We listened to what was presented to us, in my opinion again, to the city council, and now we're going to have parking issues, we're going to have traffic issues because we stuffed 39 units in an area where 1/3 parking, there's 13 parking spots and they're not dedicated to anybody. So there are major issues in these plans that go on. It's great in paper saying, look, you know what, you have too much land, so we're going to let people build and build and build, but the facts are that there are people actually paying for it. And when people talk about areas of density and they just say, oh yeah, this area is dense, that area isn't, well, when you look at the zoning, there's reasons why that areas are being built upon and they're more dense, because people really have invested in this city. Major neighborhoods have invested in this city. If you come to the Highlands, there was one on Gibson Street that they wanted to build on 4,000 square feet. Well, the neighbors have a 2-family next door and another house next door. You go over to Belvedere, I think it was Wellington, there was an issue over there. And then when you go over to just South Lowell, there's issues over there. And when you're talking about Maple Street and you're talking about other areas. So when we throw this out there, affordable housing, who are we actually developing the housing for? Are they people who grew up in Lowell, worked in Lowell? Are they people who are just coming in because these policies are in place? We cannot save this whole country and say, let's bring everybody to Lowell and we're going to be able to build housing for them when Drake's not doing it, Tingsboro's not doing it, Tewksbury's not doing it. So people who are there are going to come here, they're going to look for that affordable piece, they're going to take advantage of it, and then they're going to jump to the Tingsboroughs, Tewksbury's, and other places. It's a great piece, and don't take this negatively. I have to represent the people that I speak to, and this is what they say to us. And I'm sure the other councilors in here would say the same thing. So it has to be really, really dedicated and really have funding sources. And the key piece to this whole plan is we don't talk about how they're going to sustain it. We're going to put you in it, we're going to get you to here, but how do you sustain that affordability? Is it affordable housing, or is it just affordable renting, and we're just Lowell Housing Authority on steroids now? And we don't have the means to help people really gain education or means to jobs that actually pay. The LINK project is going to be a phenomenal piece to try to bring jobs here. And that's the key to it. If you have we're just handing money out from people who have all the jobs, it's saturated. What happens in the end? We have to be able, there has to be a job creation piece to even think about these things, and we haven't gotten that far yet. It's a nice feel-good piece, and I don't mean that in a negative way to any of your hard work. But when we go into the neighborhoods and we start talking to people, they're strapped for taxes. And if they watch someone move next door who is not paying as much as they're paying, what are they going to feel when they get up every day and they go to work? And then now they're paying, and then now there's that clash of heads that happens, and where do we go from there? So when we're looking at these, they're great on paper, and everybody has that feel-good moment, but we talk about the homeless like this, we talk about segregation. Can somebody name a neighborhood in the city that's segregated? I know mine's not. I'm in the Highlands. I could tell you my neighbors. But we put down segregation, Lowell, we're segregated. Somebody should go out to Tingsboro and take a look, or Tewksbury, or Drake. You want to see segregation. So, I mean, these words get thrown out there, and they're very, very heartbreaking to a resident who, I grew up here. I think we're welcoming to everybody. In a gateway city, let's go over that. What is a gateway city? When I was a kid, people came into the city, they moved here, they got some equity in their home, they had some wealth, and they moved out so someone else could move in and gain the equity and wealth, and it turned over. The idea was never to have people live like me in my house forever. I was supposed to turn it over so someone else could afford it, but I loved where I lived. And that's what the gateway piece to Lowell was. It used to be an affordable place so that you could educate your children, you gain wealth, and you move to another community, and some other family who is struggling or could just barely afford could come in. But that has changed. Our amounts of our pricing on our home has gone up so much that it's no longer someone can move out and someone can just move in. So those are just my thoughts. They're not really anything against anything you guys have done, because I think this is the path that the mission was. But after the few years that have gone on in the city, and day in and day out dealing with some of the things that are going on, I think we're taking in more people from the outside than we're actually helping the people from within that we talk about. Someone from California comes here and is down on the river, living because they think they're Jack Kerouac. And that's reality. And reality has its play in everybody's mind, and I know you understand, because you're like, yes, and it's true. And we're taking people in from everywhere, and if we have this affordable housing piece is outlined in this, what's the saturation rate, and do we give up our neighborhoods for this, and are we giving up everything else that we had in this city, and we're never ever going to meet what the goal and the mission really was. So that's really what my thoughts are, but I know you put a lot of work into this.
No, and I don't think we couldn't agree more with the fact that the exercise of affordable housing is a holistic exercise, right? It's not just about housing, it's about job creation and education and opportunities. The conversation about parking within the MBTA communities was done that way because we do have the public facilities that allow us to have the parking requirements be supplemented by those facilities. But I do also think that the counter effect of not doing anything with housing, then it's that if we don't do anything, then we keep losing the people that we do have here. So we are cognizant of the fact that the exercise of how we do housing production needs to be well thought out, because again, not every neighborhood has the availability of public facilities for parking. So how those requirements look like need to be restrictive so that there's that it goes hand in hand with the amount of units that we could have, the amount of parking that the neighborhood could support, and not all neighborhoods have that ability that the downtown does have, right, with the parking facilities in downtown. So we would have to be really careful about what that means for housing production. And the other thing I wanted to note is that ultimately, I know that it does happen that people from the outside come, but this plan wasn't only intended for, or it's not intended to generate growth. It's intended to manage whatever growth is naturally going to happen, to provide, again, for the housing for people who are here, and hopefully help them stay in Lowell with, how you say, Councilor, with the opportunities to be able to afford that home that is not only the house, but how does it work with housing and with jobs and education? That's something that we will have into consideration when we start talking about zoning and the other uses that can potentially bring jobs to the city. This is obviously a housing production plan in itself, but I do agree that it's a holistic exercise.
Before we started, I just want to lay the ground rule. If you need to speak, you need to raise your hands and you need to recognize by the chair. So right now, I recognize Councillor Kitchir who want a follow-up question. Thank you.
I don't disagree with you again, but when we put in the MBTA communities, we have variances in other boards that actually allow for the parking piece. We basically were told that the MBTA communities didn't need a parking requirement, so the council voted that way. If we would have voted it with the minimum of whatever, we could have kept that the same way, and then they could have went for variances and looked at all of the things that we're discussing right now, traffic patterns, other things that are going on in neighborhoods. When you look at that corridor down there, it's the first one, and it's a major, major issue. And many of those neighbors are upset about it. And I think that this plan is not, it's holistic, as you're saying. But at the end, we should have put in place in it also, what is the capacity of actually to fulfill the needs of the people who are actually affordable housing piece to? Are they going to get, education pieces? Where is the business piece to this plan? But it's a very detailed plan, and believe me, I know the work you put into it is amazing. You dealt with, when we deal in those groups, we deal in small groups. You won't see the 75-year-old person down there, the average one, at these little groups saying, I'm having a hard time because my neighbor has 10 cars and they're parking in front of my house and I can't get out of this or that, or we're too condensed or something. So we have to really think 800 people are representing 115,000. And that's the question. And a lot of people take government at their word and think that they're going to represent them in their best interest until some of these things come out. And then they go, well, this doesn't represent me in my best interest, until after they see the plan in action, their neighbor starts to build a triple decker on a small lot. So those are how do you get it out and think about that? And I just think when we look at it, and this is a great thing because you're giving us the opportunity to go back and forth, which is good. But at the end of the day, I don't know how affordable piece goes together with the job creation in the city of Lowell that's happened, and how we keep bringing in the numbers we bring in, and how, because we bring in the education piece, but there are the education piece, and then there's the rest of the city. So that's the question. How do we make jobs that pay a fair wage so people can afford exactly what is being produced for them?
Thank you, Councillor. I personally look at it differently, look at it that the affordable housing, for me, looking at the residents who are living here currently, who are renting it, and the statistics show that 19% of them are severely cost burden, rental cost burden. So I'm looking at that, and in my past life as someone who teach first-time home buyer, I know and I met a number of families who live here in Lowell, work minimum wage, and take opportunity to go to the first-time home buyer until after they finish. Then they got assistance from the city for down payment assistance up to $10,000. So those are the affordable piece that I'm looking at, and I understand where Councillor Kitchir coming from. He was concerned about people who are moving into our area. But this affordable housing, including first-time home buyer, I see as for residents who are currently living here in the city and work in the city at minimum wage, and they want to move up and own a piece of American dream, build a generational wealth. And that's one of the priority is for me, particularly on the housing subcommittee, to see a certain number of housing production allocated for home ownership, not just renter. And I'm very proud of Acre Crossing, and now we have Suffolk Place that's going to be creating that housing opportunity to build a generational wealth for family who otherwise cannot afford. Speaking of that, your report say that it's about average cost of home in Lowell of about $484, but as of today, that number have risen. No, you have it at 454, but right now, based on the statistic, the average cost of homes in Lowell is 484 from what it is in the Lowell Forward, which is about 7.4% increase in the past 2 years, in the past year. So the question I have on the number that you presented to us, Chris, that 3150 affordable housing will be produced and 800 of them affordable. Are they rental affordable or are they ownership affordable? That's my first question. Number two, the statistics said 599 lack of full kitchen and bathroom. Can you expand and explain why a house with no kitchen and no bathroom? Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. So for the affordable housing goal, it is mum on whether those are ownership or rental units. We would expect that there would be a mix because there is a need for both. But that mix maybe is dependent on further study, and also opportunities in terms of the nonprofits and the developers and what their capacity is, other than the recommendation that ownership units be built in Central Lowell to create a better mix of ownership and rental opportunities in Central Lowell. And those numbers, the 3150 and the 600. So the 3150 is based specifically on the projected growth that is looking at historic in-migration to Lowell, and not necessarily international in-migration, but even just from other communities in Massachusetts, combined with the birth rate in Lowell. And looking at the household formation, and then adding on that goal of having a healthy vacancy rate. And so that's where we got that 3150 number. And then we looked at about a quarter of those as affordable. In terms of the 599...
Did you say a quarter of that 3150 affordable ownership?
Yeah, I believe that was roughly, yes. Not exact, but it was a rough number. In terms of the plumbing and kitchen American Community Survey question. So that is self-reported, so we don't know how people are interpreting that. It does ask specifically if you have, I believe, for a kitchen, a refrigerator, a full oven, and for a bathroom, if you have a toilet and a bathtub or a shower. And so some of those might be just false self-reporting, but we imagine a number of those might be an illegal attic unit or some other living situation where a family's doubled up and they're kind of crammed into one part of the unit. I certainly know that many households don't have an oven, for example. They have a microwave, they have a warming plate, they don't have an oven. That would count as not having complete kitchen facilities. Of course, that does have impacts on whether you're able to cook, and so that is an important consideration. So the goal is to reduce that number. Lowell's is pretty similar to other gateway communities. It's a little bit higher, I believe, but not by much.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize my colleague, Councilor Kachias, who want to follow up questions on.
So when we talk about the definition of affordable, we're talking about subsidizing, not affordable. So we're not making anything affordable, we're subsidizing it, correct? Is that where the funding's coming from? We're taking it one place or another, the building costs are all the same, everything's the same, but we're subsidizing it out of somewhere, right?
So when the plan refers to affordable housing, that is income-restricted subsidized housing. Now that could be, in many cases, that is mixed income housing where the market rates offset the cost of the affordable housing. In other cases, it might be a nonprofit utilizing state or federal grants for offsetting the cost of the housing.
I don't want you to think I'm disagreeing with you. What I'm saying is 19% of the city is making household income of under 25%. I mean, $25,000. 19%. So how do we get that number to 25 to say 60, to 73 where the other piece is? How do we do that and not just say, here's subsidized housing, we're going to keep you at under $25,000, and people shoot for that because there's a subsidy that they can get homeownership when the person at $73,000 can't get the same right. So that's where the piece comes in. When you talk about subsidizing, you're saying affordable. Well, affordable and coming down, they're two major different things. And when Councilor Yem says the housing production, in the city of Lowell, we've seen housing production go up, but we haven't seen any rent go down, and we haven't seen the prices go down. So that tells you that people with more means that can't afford Cambridge or one of the other communities is coming here and purchasing it away from people. Yes, we can offset that by having a subsidized piece, but the question comes down is, how do we raise people's incomes to a level where they're no longer in need? And that's the question. Or do they stay within and keep? And that's really what the question is to this, because everybody wants to own something outright themselves for, as Councilor Yem said, generational wealth. And that's the question is, okay, it's all a feel-good, nice thing. We all subsidize, we're all going to pay this or that. But what happens if you're just over that threshold and someone under it gets it? What about them? And then where does that line keep moving and where does it stop? And it's subsidized housing. So we're talking about taking money from one place and putting it in another to give somebody an opportunity. Do we have any data that shows that the people who are getting the affordable housing, that their actual incomes have gone up and taken them out of that category and gone to the next? And there probably is. And I think that those are the things to show that, yes, this is what happens with maybe affordable housing piece, puts a household in there and they're able to send their child to a different system and make them better. I don't know that answer, but as I see, it's a subsidy more than making something affordable. So the subsidy is coming from one place to build up another, which everybody needs the housing. No one's debating that question. I think the debate comes down to, how do we raise people's income levels to try to meet cost?
Chris, you want to answer that?
Yes. So talking about the top line affordable housing numbers is difficult because there's a lot of different types of households. I don't think we're anticipating increasing, for example, folks with severe disabilities incomes or folks, senior folks incomes. So the people that utilize affordable housing are very diverse. In addition, when we say affordable housing in this plan, we're talking about income restricted to 80% AMI, area median income or less. 80% area median income is the salary of a teacher in Lowell. It is the salary of a police officer in Lowell. So there's a variety of income levels as well that is hidden in that top line number. And I think teasing that out is useful, but it is a top line number kind of combining all of these different types of affordability in terms of both sales units and rental units. And then the other thing you mentioned, the job element, and I just want to get in a plug that there is an Economic Development Summit for a region-wide economic plan happening on March 20th that isn't specific to Lowell, but is Greater Lowell, and addresses that other side. So we do at NIMCOG, we also have a region-wide housing plan that we're working on. So at NIMCOG, we really do believe that a lot of these plans have to work holistically together.
So that's one of our challenges right now, is that as a city council, we're getting opportunities with some land that the city owns in other areas. Do you put in commercial so that you can actually create job and growth, or do you go by the plans that are going now and say, do we create housing? And there is a balance because there's only so much land that we have available. So what is there a balance? You do, first floor and restrict it. But then when that normally happens, you get people who don't want to live there because of noises, or they complain about the business, and next thing you know, the businesses are gone. So that's the challenge we have because we're land restricted and everything. Do we just throw in housing in there and say, okay, everyone has a house and everything, but we don't have any means to actually go out and get the positions that will actually afford these places? So And I think that's a challenge for all of us to look at and say, what is the best use for these parcels? And that's why we rely on DPD to do that for us. And I think they've done a really good job at that for us. So that was just my point to the whole thing.
Yeah, we have about 7 minutes left, Councillor. I thank you for presentation, and I like this a lot, and I understand what Councillor Kitchia is coming from. I understand that, and to me, affordable housing is not so much subsidizing, but it's also the funding sources that allow you touch on a mixed development where developer develop a market rate and allocate a certain percentage for affordable housing for family who earn a certain income level, AMI, to qualify them. And I understand what Councilor Kitchia said. What about the person that not going to make it but barely make it? How do they? So we have the program to afford to help them to, to be able to go over that hump, to get the ownership in a form of down payment assistance by the city and some lender who provide that as well. So, Councillor Kitchia, Councillor Chow, your last opportunity to say something before we move on.
Well, it's a lot to discuss about, the housing issues affect us and affect the entire country. Given the 1 minute we have left, I won't ask the last question, but I want to thank all of you again for being here, and we look forward to the next meeting and report discussion. As a result of this, okay, is that what we should do, Mr. Chairman, is to refer this to the City Council for review? Is there still a motion that needed? So I'd like to make a motion to forward this to the entire City Council to review and for discussion.
To vote on it.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Okay, Mr.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes, second. Thank you very much. Yeah.